Do you ever sit down to write, play a few chords, and it all feels a bit lifeless? Like the progression is clunky and the chords aren't actually doing anything. That's what keeps so many players stuck in the amateur loop, where your playing sounds fine, but nothing feels expressive or intentional. This video gives you a handful of simple sus chord tricks, ones you can drop straight into your next song to unlock movement, lift, and emotion. You might have played a sus2 or a sus4 before, maybe even without realising it. But do you know what makes them sound so different from major or minor chords? Have a listen to this example. See if you can spot where I play the sus chords. Here's what's going on. A normal major or minor chord has three essential notes: the root, the third, and the fifth. The third is the note that defines whether a chord is major or happy, or minor or sad. Suspended chords remove the third and replace it with a second or a fourth, hence the name sus2 or sus4. That swap changes the character completely. The chord no longer has that clearly defined happy or sad quality. Instead, it sounds open, unresolved, like it's asking a question that hasn't been answered yet. That feeling of tension, that little bit of emotional uncertainty, is what makes sus chords so powerful. A lot of players stumble into sus chords accidentally. They might lift a finger and hit a nice sounding voicing, but they don't always know what they've done or why it works. And that's a shame, because once you understand these shapes, you can start using them deliberately. Suspended chords swap out the note that defines a chord as major or minor, which is why they sound so open, ambiguous, and unresolved. Do you ever find yourself sitting on one chord for a few bars and wishing it did something? Not quite knowing what to change, but feeling like it's just hanging there? That's exactly where sus chords shine. What if a simple finger lift could inject motion and melody into that moment, without changing the underlying chord? Let's stay on the A major chord for a moment. Notice what I do with my pinky and ring fingers here. When you linger on the chord too long without variation, it can start to sound repetitive, or even lifeless. This is where sus chords should be part of your songwriting toolkit. Starting on the standard open A chord shape, I simply added my pinky to sound the D note. This turned A major into A sus4. Similarly, when I removed my ring finger, we heard an open B note, giving us an A sus2. Simple moves like this on open chords mean that certain sus chords are fantastic for injecting a rhythmic, riff-like feel. They comfortably allow you to use hammer-ons and pull-offs, which add interest and colour without much effort. If you're hanging out on one chord for a while, toggling between the bass chord and a sus2 or sus4 is one of the easiest ways to add life and melody. Sus chords are a key part of the songwriter's toolkit, but if you want to skip the trial and error and discover how to write songs that actually sound like you, click the link in the description below, and each week I'll send you the playbook that everyday guitarists need. Now, what if your progressions could feel more emotional and more musical without adding any complexity? The secret often lies in delaying your resolution. In other words, using a chord that feels like it's about to go somewhere, but doesn't quite until the next moment. See if you can spot this in the next example. Because suspended chords feel unresolved, they naturally lead the ear towards resolution. That's why they're often placed right before a return to the root chord. They heighten the emotional payoff. One of the simplest and most effective versions of this is the 5 sus4 to 5 to 1 trick. In the example, we saw this in the key of C major. I took a G sus4, then moved to G major before resolving to C. It's a classic move used in gospel, pop, even film scores, and it works in almost any key. You can also use this idea another way. Have a listen to the next example. Sometimes resolving to a sus chord instead of a regular major or minor adds a sense of suspension. It keeps the listener waiting a bit longer. In the example, I flipped things around. In the key of D major, we had a simple 1-4-5 progression. After the 5 chord A7, I moved to D sus4. This further delayed the resolution with the standard 1 chord, D major. Because sus chords feel unresolved, they're perfect for creating suspense right before a big chord change, especially at the end of a phrase or section. Have you ever wanted your chord progression to sound more emotional, more lush or more dreamy? In this next example, see if you can spot what I do to achieve this. Open string sus chords are a brilliant way to create that ringing, ambient sound that seems to shimmer and float. They work especially well in slow sections or fingerstyle arrangements, where there's space for the sound to develop. Here's why they work. Open strings ring out longer than fretted notes. That natural resonance fills the space around your chords and connects them with a sense of continuity. When those open strings form part of a sus2 or a sus4 chord, you get this perfect blend of movement and stability. The suspended notes float over the progression, giving it a cohesive emotional feel. In the example, the open high E string carried across all of the chords. Combining this with a fingerstyle approach and several other open strings gave the progression a depth and resonance. Letting open strings ring out as part of sus chords adds shimmer and emotional depth, especially in fingerstyle or slower sections. You might think sus chords are only useful in open position, but there's far more you can do with them. Notice what's different about this next example. That was E sus2, played in 2 different positions, first with the root on the D string, and then again with the root on the A string. This is a movable sus2 shape. You can move all over the neck. The result of this is you gain freedom. You're no longer locked into the same few progressions. You can build chord movements that travel the length of the neck, exploring new voicings and textures as you go. This also leads naturally to better voice leading, the practice of moving smoothly between chord tones. Sus chords often provide a stepping stone between chords, or an elegant way to pass from one idea to the next. And it doesn't end with sus2 chords. Check out this next example. This time we heard G sus4. It was voiced with the root note on the low E string, providing a full bar shape that you can use for any sus4 chord. But it doesn't end there. What if we focus in on the core 3 notes that any sus chord is constructed with? Have a listen to this in the next example. Here we heard both the C sus2 and the C sus4 chords. They were played up high as triads. You can see that moving from sus2 to sus4 involved adding the pinky to the B string. These shapes are movable, with the root note being on the G string. These higher note triads provide a delicate sus touch, which can also work well when arpeggiated or added to your riffs or solos. Bar chords and triads can become sus chords, letting you add suspended colour anywhere on the fretboard, in any key. We've looked at sus chords on their own, one trick at a time, but what happens when you start to combine them into a single progression? See if you can pick out ideas we've discussed in this next example. This example begins with ambiguity. The C sus2 and A sus2 make the key unclear at first. They use triads, hammer-ons and open strings to provide resonance and depth. Then we start to reveal the key by playing F major 7 before hitting G sus4. This is all acting as a subtle C major key progression, which is fully revealed when G sus4 moves to G major, the 5 chord, and finally settles on C major, the 1 tonic. Once you combine sus embellishments, open strings and movable shapes, you can build a full progression that flows with emotion and clarity. Now that you've learned how sus chords unlock movement and emotion inside a progression, what if you could take even the most basic chord change, like A minor to C, and make it sound like you? Watch this next video where I'll show you 5 subtle ways to transform plain transitions into expressive, signature moments that actually sound like a song.